Economic Forum has released its Global Competitiveness Report for 2018, and there is good news for India because we have jumped 5 spots. We've gone up from about 63 in 2017 to 58 in 2018. In fact, India is amongst the most improved countries in the G20 as well as the BRICS nations. In the BRICS, India comes after China and Russia. The report says that India has made significant investments in infrastructure, which continues to be a constraint and a bottleneck. The top 5 rankings include Singapore, Switzerland, Germany and Japan, and of course the United States is right at the top. Joining us now to discuss India's place in the world when it comes to competitiveness rankings, we have with us the World Economic Forum's economist and author of the report, Attilio Di Batista. Attilio, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Well, progress has been made. India is up 5 places in 2018 versus 2017. Where have you seen the most significant changes, positive changes, and what administrative hurdles continue to hold us back?
Thank you very much. So like you mentioned, India has been one of the most improved countries in the world, actually the most improved G20 economy. We've seen an improvement across multiple dimensions. Probably the ones where the improvement has been fastest has been on the institutional front, especially when it comes to the IT readiness of the public administration, but also in terms of judicial independence and some other aspects, but also in terms of ICT adoption, although from a rather low base, but there has been a lot of positive improvement in terms of mobile broadband adoption and also internet usage. And finally, also business dynamism. We've seen the administrative requirements for business dynamics that have improved, especially when it comes to insolvency frameworks and bankruptcy law. So these three, I would say, are
good news. Where do you... Right. In specific, because the report does point out that what holds us back are administrative hurdles. So outside of the infrastructure-related bottlenecks, is there anything specific with respect to clearances, approvals, dealing with the bureaucracy, where not enough meaningful change has happened?
Well, I think we cannot really point out to specific directions. I would say on the insolvency framework, like I said, there has been a big improvement. There is still some room for improvement there as well, at least according to the data that we use from the World Bank. There are also some administrative hurdles when it comes to trade and import and export. So in terms of trade facilitation, that's another area where there could be more improvement. But yeah, so I would say those two are the ones that from our data also are more focused for your country.
The fact that we've gone up 5 spots, do you believe that this is going to have a significant impact when it comes to, for instance, India's ability to export? Because that seems to be an area where we are underperforming. The government has this Make in India program, but what we have seen, for instance, is a lot of assemble in India. We continue to import large quantities of components as well as finished goods, smartphones being just one example. So do you believe with this jump in the competitiveness rankings, we could see a positive impact both in terms of exports and our ability to bridge ourselves to the global supply chain?
I think increasingly it's important to be connected to global supply chains and global value chains. We do specify, especially this year in the report, the importance of trade openness and openness more broadly for competitiveness. So I would say it's broader than just export. It's important to be really connected to global commerce. In that sense, I think there are some areas where India, but more in general, South Asia could improve when it comes, of course, to tariff policy, but not only. Also when it comes to non-tariff barriers and customs clearance processes, etc. So those are the areas which will be important to work on for India to really be able to profit from globalization and global value chains. But yeah, all of the rest, of course, competitiveness is a component of being able to have a productive economy. That's how we define competitiveness. So productivity will help India also better perform globally and internationally.
So 2 quick questions, Attilio. You talked about productivity. What is it going to mean, especially from a jobs perspective? What does the data show you in terms of unemployment as well as the potential to be able to draw in more jobs as we move towards more value-added manufacturing? And secondly, you spoke of global trade and the fact that India continues to be somewhat insular in some aspects. What would those be? Because we pretty much opened up foreign direct investment across the board in most sectors.
One step at a time. Basically, in terms of productivity, it's very difficult to say today whether actually manufacturing and export and productivity will necessarily translate into more jobs. I think that's one of the points that we make also in the report more broadly. There are new ways of thinking about development paths for countries. We used to believe before that countries will need to move into manufacturing, and that will bring more productive jobs and more employment, and that would be the standard pathway to for economic development. These will probably change because of the fourth industrial revolution, so we will not be necessarily following, but it's not sure that all countries will follow the same pathway that they followed in the past. So it's very difficult to predict right now whether the same drivers of employment, of productive employment that worked in the past will also work in the future. And this applies globally and as well to India. So this is one word of caution in general. It will be important for employment, especially to work on skills and human capital. That's really what will drive in the long term both competitiveness and productivity and social inclusion and protection of workers and of shared value and benefit for society. So really human capital and talent is what will be key for all countries to actually be able to grow in an inclusive manner. On that front, I think India has some work to do, both with respect to global benchmarks and also within the region. There are some pockets of excellence. There are some very good research institutions, some great universities, but there's still a big divide between urban areas and some of the more rural areas. So for India to really profit and benefit from increased value added and more manufacturing and productivity, they will also need to focus on those aspects. In terms of trade, well, one aspect that comes out of our data also is a trade tariff, for example, that it's common to some of the countries in the region. There has been improvement, but still India, as well as most South Asian countries, have a relatively high import tariff. And given that today more and more global value chains are interconnected, also to be able to export, you will need to be able to supply and import inputs of production from abroad at a very low cost and in a very efficient way.